So we heard from Fred and Dieter about CryptoKitties earlier, and CryptoKitties was really, the first NFT project, and it's pretty crazy because this category is still about 6 months old. But after CryptoKitties and ERC 721, we've seen just an explosion in new projects, and it reminds me a little of Bitcoin in 2012 in the sense that I think there's a ton of activity and interest, both from the developer side and the consumer side, but a limited number of high-quality projects. But on this panel, I think we've got 3 of the more interesting projects that are building kind of in the non-fungible token space to talk about kind of how things are going in the space and where we see this space going in 6 or 12 months. So why don't we start by you guys just briefly talking about kind of what you're working on and really what inspired you to start building in the NFT category? And maybe we can start with James.
Awesome, thanks, Nick. I'm James, and I co-founded Etherbots, which is essentially robot wars on the blockchain. So when CryptoKitties came out, that was awesome. That was a revelation. We saw these NFTs, which had this new element to them. And we thought that the integration of that and gameplay was going to be the next big thing. So we decided to build a game where you can build robots and battle them on the blockchain, where the parts you build your robot from are individual NFT parts. And based on that, some of them can have different rarities. You can have provable scarcity. Players don't need to worry about the game studios, like us, modifying the parameters, and things which are previously rare and previously great parts can stay like that. And we think that that's really cool.
Cool. How about Devin, you want to talk about Opensea?
So my name is Devin Finzer. I'm a co-founder of Opensea. And my co-founder and I were excited about CryptoKitties as well, being kind of the first mainstream application built on the blockchain. And the way we kind of came about the idea for Opensea was we just joined a lot of those communities and saw what the problems they were dealing with were. And one of those problems was, how do you buy and sell any asset on the blockchain, primarily in these games, but ultimately other types of digital assets that were backed at that time by the Ethereum blockchain. So we built a general marketplace for non-fungible tokens. We currently support 25 of these new games that are coming out on blockchain, and have done around $500,000 in volume on our marketplace since we launched just back in January. And then as time goes on, our kind of strategy is to partner with game developers and do a revenue share on the secondary sales of these items, so that they can sort of have an instant marketplace for their items and plug into this substantial liquidity pool that we've built around non-fungible assets.
David?
Hi, I'm Dave Pekar, CEO and co-founder of Rarebits. So I've been building applications and experiences around digital goods for the past 10 years. Was part of the core team behind Farmville and got to see how digital goods and these experiences can go really broad and be really impactful for a large, wide audience. And so when we saw what was going on around the NFT space about midway through last year with some of the early work around the ERC 721 specification, we realized that digital goods are going to dramatically change in the future. And that's because digital goods that live on the blockchain are fundamentally better for consumers. It just gives consumers more control, more ownership, more autonomy over the stuff that they own digitally. And so that's our mission, is just to give control back to users in terms of their digital possessions. So that's why we created a marketplace somewhat similar to Opensea. It's actually a no-fee marketplace where you can buy and sell this new type of digital good that lives on the Ethereum blockchain. But we definitely see there being a pretty significant gap in terms of the quality of digital goods that exist on the blockchain right now. And so that's why we're also working on tools that will help creators of all kinds bring their content onto the blockchain and engage their audiences with this new type of experience and this new type of digital good that can create all kinds of fun and magic on the internet.
So since CryptoKitties launched, if you go to dappradar.com, you could see tens or maybe hundreds at this point of really CryptoKitties clones, right? There's crypto cities, crypto countries, crypto horses, crypto tulips. And it seems like there's a lot of close to, if not all-out scam projects, right? Talk a little bit about, and you guys are seeing this because, particularly on the marketplace side, you have to figure out what to add and what not. So maybe explain kind of what we're seeing with some of these crypto celebrities, these projects that seem to get a ton of interest and then disappear.
Yeah, so what we've seen with projects of those kind, just in general in this new crypto gaming space, the main two categories that have emerged have been around breeding and have been around this snatch mechanic, or what some people call a hot potato mechanic. So breeding is the CryptoKitties mechanic where you take two things and you get a new thing that has value. It pairs pretty well with crypto because obviously like storing value, scarcity, ownership is one of the inherent characteristics of the blockchain that's so great. It's also like a modified version of crafting. And so I think you'll also see a lot of crafting games in the future where breeding is kind of a subset of crafting. The other mechanic that you're referring to is where if an asset is purchased by one individual, everyone else in the ecosystem has the opportunity to purchase that asset for a slightly increased price. You might purchase it because you think that a third individual will purchase it from you, thereby you making a profit. But I don't think that it's a really strong mechanic, and it's not one that drives retention or long-term engagement at all. It's a pretty opportunistic mechanic, and hopefully one that will fizzle out in the ecosystem before too long. I think that what we need to see are more rich systems, more actual game mechanics, and like a rich experience that has a few different cool mechanics all interacting, rather than just developers just copying and dabbling one relatively thin mechanic.
Do you have a sense of the trend? I mean, it feels like a couple months ago these things were really exploding, and my sense is that they've died a little bit, and I don't know if it's just consumers getting smarter about it or what, but do you have a sense of kind of the latest there?
I think that they are fizzling, and I think what you're seeing now is really serious folks who are serious about making great games and experience, taking some time to actually build an awesome game. I mean, James, you can probably speak about some of this, but I'm so excited for the experiences that come out that may not come out next week or next month, but that'll come out later in the year that have actually put time into making a full-on experience rather than, again, a singular light mechanic to capitalize on the market opportunity.
Yep. So, yeah, that's an interesting point. So, James, obviously you're building a new game in this space, and I think you did a pre-sale of your digital goods. It was the largest pre-sale of an NFT-based project to date. Maybe talk a little bit about, one, like, why do a pre-sale? How did you go about generating a community and launching the thing? And then maybe describe a little bit of the actual game mechanics within Etherbots.
Sure. So I think one of the reasons that having pre-sales for multiplayer games is really important is that it means when you launch, you can have a network already, and you can have people who they can play against. And because of that, the pre-sale model lines up really well, especially where these in-game assets, which you actually play with and actually have some real use and real mechanic, are what you're selling. You're not selling some sort of fungible token, which is nothing. You're actually selling, in our case, you're selling the robot body, or you're selling the minigun turret that sits on top of it. And then to go into the mechanics and sort of elaborate on what we heard David say before. Before Etherbots, the main sort of mechanics were breeding based on CryptoKitties copies, and as well these hot potato games. And when we sat down and had to think about what we wanted Etherbots to be, we thought that there was such room for actual strategic, meaningful decisions. Whereas with breeding clones and everything, it's just spam it as much as you can and try and then sell the rest of the things you create. And with hot potato games, it's hope that you're not the last one in by buying it and then spreading the word, trying to grab someone else to grab it off you. But I think that one of the cool things about decentralized gaming, and this is what's sort of just getting started, and a lot of teams are having a look at the best way to deal with, is how you can have something open, such as a gameplay mechanic, allow it to have meaningful decisions, within it, and also how that impacts the players. So the players can have the trust that this gameplay that they love is still going to be there. And I think that there's a lot of things which can happen in the area as well. So as we heard before, when Dieter was on stage talking about how people were building things on top of CryptoKitties, I think that you have this potential for these assets to be used again. So someone can also take the Etherbots parts, and whether they're just building sales history tools or battle trackers, which people have done, and they like building these external tools. You can also build external games, and I think it's really interesting as these real games get built out to see where other people can take them as well.
So I think there's a few things to unpack there. One, I'm particularly interested in kind of the pre-sale component of it, because to me, I'm surprised we haven't seen more pre-sales of NFTs, right? Because one, I think there's a more clear regulatory stance there on selling a digital good versus selling something that could be perceived as security. And two, I think it's a fantastic way to bootstrap a community around a game, right? So I personally think we could see in the next year traditional gaming companies that are doing large pre-sales of digital goods, and it's a way for them to generate revenue up front and build this community around the game. So do you guys agree with that, and why do you think we haven't seen more of it yet?
I think that the games companies, the big games companies, they're interested and they're watching the space, but as of yet, we haven't quite had that killer, full 3D, world-class experience maybe made by one of these big game studios. And the second that comes out, I think that the interest from these big game studios is absolutely going to explode in this area. There's such a great... I think that cryptocurrency helps games. This ERC 721 non-fungible token standard is really a huge value add for gamers themselves. But also, I think that gaming in general can actually help crypto in that it is maybe the first use outside of just financial contracts and instruments for cryptocurrency, and it might be how it spreads mainstream.
Do you guys have any further thoughts there? Devin?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think we're going to see some big pre-sales. I'm not sure it'll happen. I think it'll take a little longer. The reason being, games are a lot more complicated to actually get a user to understand and use, especially in an environment where it requires having MetaMask, having Ethereum, and trusting the game developer, as opposed to an ICO, which was a highly speculative event, didn't have to be in the gaming industry to kind of be excited about it, and you could immediately hop on a centralized exchange and start buying the token. So I think we'll just need to see the model proven out a little more. One project that I think was super exciting in the space was Decentraland, which I believe did a $10 million pre-sale for their land. And that's a project that continues to execute and build out some of their core technology. And I think we could see that proving out a little bit of this and projects like Etherbots as well, proving out that model, and then that'll allow bigger game developers to come in and do larger scale pre-sales.
I mean, I think you'll see the same dynamic that is played out on Steam with early access and on Kickstarter, where creators and game creators who have done successful stuff that have an active community that already admire them will be super interested in their future work and the pre-sales that they've done. But up to this point, there are no game makers who have made multiple games because everything is so brand new. So I absolutely think that the folks who release really high quality stuff will see a large pre-sale market in future iterations, and it's just a matter of time.
So I want to dive into game mechanics a little more too, because I think the design space here is wide open. So maybe talk about some interesting kind of new game mechanics that you guys have seen introduced recently.
Yeah, I think at a high level, what we're kind of seeing is an unbundling of a traditionally very vertically integrated model. So in a centralized game, you would have full control over the items, the logic, the user experience, and everything about that game. And now what CryptoKitties kind of pioneered was a model where you open up a lot of that. So you say, in CryptoKitties' case, we're actually going to put the logic and the items on a shared database and allow anyone to build interesting things on top of them. And the ownership was a really interesting component of that, but as was alluded to, another interesting component of that was the ability to build things on top of existing items. So we saw that with Kitty Hats, which was a game that allowed you to accessorize your CryptoKitties. We saw that with Kitty Race, which allowed you to race your CryptoKitties. So I think more games that come out with that open model in mind and kind of leverage that unique characteristic of the blockchain will be the ones that make the biggest splash in the industry. And I think that enables games that can last a lot longer throughout time. So games that have effects on not only the interface that the game developer themselves have built, but on this kind of tangled web of other games that might have completely different experiences, completely different developers who don't even know each other, but are affected by the same sort of network effect around the original game logic. And that's just starting to happen. CryptoKitties proved it out to some extent, but I think we have yet to see a game that kind of enters the space with that mentality from the beginning.
I think that the open model is interesting, but I might take a slightly different tact. I think that fundamentally, when there's a new platform, you have to look at what's good at that platform and what are the mechanics that pair well with it. So back in the day when we were working on Farmville, you had this platform, which was great for re-engagement through social surfacing, and you had this mechanic, which was the plant harvest mechanic, which was an amazing tool for maximizing retention. There had been farm games before, there had been social networks before, but when you pair those two things together, you get explosive viral growth and amazing re-engagement loop. And then when you take that into the world of the blockchain, what are the inherent attributes of this new platform that could be paired with mechanics in the game space? From my perspective, it's scarcity, it's ownership, it's a market, and it's transparency. And so all of the mechanics should be oriented towards those fundamentally new things about the blockchain. So the types of mechanics that I think about have to do with social coordination and trading, consumption of resources that are necessary and can be consumed because they're scarce by this system. And a lot of some mechanics that we've seen in traditional games that can be reinterpreted into the context of the blockchain and make an amazing fit.
Okay, so I want to go in a slightly different direction because I think we all recognize scalability is an important problem, but we haven't talked about it a ton today. And I'm curious, you guys are all building dApps on Ethereum right now, and we all saw what happened when CryptoKitties got popular in December and clogged the Ethereum network for a bit. So how are you guys thinking about scalability for your dApps and there's several different approaches that you could take, but I'm curious how you guys are thinking about it. Maybe you could start, James.
Sure. So scalability is a very pressing issue, I guess, for us to solve as developers. And there's things which we can sit back and wait for and hope that the protocol layer developers get to soon, whether that's sharding and switching to proof of stake. So Etherbots runs on the Ethereum network, and I guess most sort of production dApps now have to run on Ethereum, but there are some layer 2 solutions which are a really good fit for games, and game developers are actually driving the space forward in. So obviously there's the potential to have side chains where you can atomic swap your assets on and off them, and then you can run your own consensus algorithm for that side chain, which can be much faster. And then there's also the potential to use things like stake channels, which is something which we're exploring in Etherbots, about how you can have a generalized stake channel so that players can play the game without each turn having to be on-chain. And I think that what this gets around as well is sort of the roadblock of microtransactions, which is sort of a hindrance to adoption of these games. It's quite frustrating for people when everything they want to do, which enacts with sort of the data persistence layer, costs them at least 10 cents. That's a frustrating experience. And because of that, what you've had to do in the past is either give them a financial reward or a token and have some financial utility behind it, or have sort of rare and valuable parts, which are the in-game assets. But I think that with essentially state channels and side chains working in conjunction with some of the proof of stake work, which is happening on Ethereum, scalability becomes much more manageable. And then, of course, there's other networks and protocols which are coming out, which promise to solve a lot of these issues. They're still not quite in the usable space yet, but I think that we're going to see a lot of development of these, some big names as well, in the next 6 months who might provide a viable alternative to Ethereum, or maybe not. We'll see.
If you guys have any additional thoughts, I mean, you basically covered both, on-chain Ethereum, as well as layer 2, as well as kind of new layer 1 blockchains. Are you guys, I mean, if, the next CryptoKitties blows up, would you guys look to, another chain, something like EOS, which, may launch soon, or other chains like smart contract chains like that?
Absolutely. We don't see ourselves as an Ethereum company. We see ourselves as working on the next generation of digital goods. And so we've purposely architected our system to be blockchain agnostic, and will be on whatever systems are best for the consumer. So I think I don't think that we presuppose a winner in this brand new burgeoning field, and we're going to have to stay agile and do what's best for the user.
Yeah, I agree. I think each layer of the stack from layer 2 protocols on upwards has the ability to abstract over the underlying layers. And that's what a lot of these games are starting to do with these hybrid, centralized, decentralized solutions. And will certainly move to wherever the users are going. And even if that means that the users are spread across multiple chains in the future as well.
So we've got a couple minutes left. And I mean, to me, it's crazy that, 6 months ago, this category didn't exist, and now we're having, a panel on it. So it's a sign of how fast things are moving in this space. But I'm curious, kind of in the next 12 months, what are you guys excited about? Where do you think we'll be? Talk a little bit about that. And it could either be specific to, what you're working on, or just generally kind of in this category. And maybe, why don't we start with Dave?
Yeah, so I'm really excited for great new content and experiences to come onto the platform. I think in part that'll come from the next generation of games that folks like Etherbots are going for. But I think in part there are other types of experiences besides just games that are a great fit for this new type of digital good. And that's more the tack that we're taking. So we see there being a really big opportunity for the large pre-existing digital audiences to actually bring them into like the world of blockchain via digital goods. So specifically folks like the community's built around folks like YouTubers and Twitch streamers and personalities on Instagram or wherever. Those are already large digital audiences that we could unlock really cool new experiences for. So that's why we're working on a new product called Fanbits, which is going to empower those creators to bring their content onto the blockchain with all kinds of fun experiences built in. I also think that there are some really interesting opportunities to start bridging non-fungible tokens to real-world experiences, perhaps even real-world physical assets. That's not necessarily somewhere that we're focused just yet, but I do anticipate there being a lot of interesting applications in that space on the horizon.
Yeah, similarly, I think I'm excited in the gaming space. I think there's a lot of unexplored game mechanics that translate in really interesting different ways to the blockchain and will bring in more and more consumers. On our side, I think our main focus is how do we bring the best liquidity to this space, and how do we create a market that actually allows some of these game mechanics where buying and selling is really important, and being able to sell your asset after you use it turns out to be really important for users as well. So excited about the games, and I think over the next couple years, excited about the existing digital assets that people will tokenize and move to the blockchain as well.
The reason I'm so excited about blockchain gaming is because gamers are essentially digital natives. They are so used to interacting with these purely digital assets. It's only been in a centralized manner before. And so we're very excited at Etherbots about bringing up the quality of games to be the same as all the other AAA games which are out there, while also incorporating these exciting new elements of scarcity, tradability, and transparency as well in this space. And we think that this space is really just beginning.
Awesome. We're right at time. Thank you very much, guys.